Hello, welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I did a bunch of time in prison, so I talk about prison. Today we're talking about being institutionalized. What is it? What does it mean? What are my personal experiences with it? So be sure to like and subscribe if you like the content and you want to see more stuff like it. Thank you to all my subscribers and viewers. With that, let's get into the video. There are several different ways that you could define being institutionalized. I'm not going to go with a dictionary definition here. I'm going to go with a definition that I would say or give based on my personal experiences. From what I've seen, being institutionalized is when a person has spent so much time in an institutional environment that becomes their normal. It becomes very easy for them and very efficient to survive in an institutional setting. That is their normal, that is what they're good at, that is what they're used to, and that is the best way for them to function. And life in the free world becomes what is difficult for them to do. That is where they feel uncomfortable, that is where they feel, that is a world that feels alien to them. That is a world that feels alien to them. And so that is what's difficult for them to achieve, is functioning in the free world. My friend and subscriber, Mark Rogers, talked to me about it, and he made the analogy of going to a foreign land. And that is very accurate. Getting out of prison after spending a lot of time on the inside is like going to a foreign country. We have our own language in prison. We have our own lingo, our own slang. Everything has its own meaning. We have our own social customs, expectations, traditions, rituals. We have a certain way that we conduct ourselves. We don't talk to the cops. We mind our own business. We conduct ourselves with integrity. We don't get in debt. We don't rat on people. That's how we conduct ourselves. We conduct ourselves with respect and with principles because that's all we have. We don't have a nice house. We don't have a nice car. We don't have a fancy job. What we have is the principles that we live by in prison. And there are certain things that you can do in prison and that you can't do on the streets. And there's things that you can do on the streets that you can't do in prison. You cannot call another man in prison a bitch or a punk or a rat or a hoe and not expect to get in a fight. If you say those words in prison, you're fighting, period. And if you're not going to make it in prison very long. That's just the way it goes. And out here, you are expected to adhere to a certain set of social expectations. And it's different. It's very different. Technology is different when you get out. Society as a whole is different when you get out. In prison, if you want to interact with your buddies, with your friends, you go out to the yard and you work out together. You go to a religious call out together. You go to a class together. You go to a group together. You go play basketball. You go play softball, whatever. You go do something together. You hang out. Even if you're locked down in your cells, you yell between cells. You talk to each other between cells. You talk to each other through the bars. You'll see guys sticking a mirror out of their bar so they can see the guy in the cell next to them and talk to him. So that is very different from the world we live in today, where you talk to people on Facebook or any number of other social media, platforms. You have Facebook, you have Snapchat, Instagram, all these things, and your social interaction with somebody is boiled down to a comment or a like or something like that. I know this sounds weird coming from me because I do a bunch of stuff on YouTube, which is another social media platform. So society's different. You have different expectations, and things seem superficial. And that leads to another thing, and that is a sense of acceptance and belonging and connection to other people. You don't feel a strong sense of connection to others. Whereas in prison, you do have a connection to others. You do have a strong sense of community. You have a sense of camaraderie. You spend time with people who are at the lowest point in their lives. You hear about their stories. You experience their pain with them. And you develop a really strong bond from that. There's also the degree of, things like hypervigilance. That is very common in prison. You're on edge constantly, every day. Every day a life or death situation could arise. You could have a riot. You could have a fight. You could have someone try to stab you, rape you, whatever. And to be in that environment day in and day out for years on end or decades on end, that is very difficult. It takes a toll on the psyche. After a while, it seems like it's hard to bring it back down and bring it back to baseline. When I was in prison, I would see things like, I would see where people would congregate. I would look for potential threats. If somebody was wearing baggy clothing that could conceal a knife somewhere, if they were wearing a hoodie, which you get hoodies in prison, or a denim jacket, and those can be used to hide a knife. So I look for stuff like that. Even though I'm not in that environment anymore, I look for things like that. I look for people congregating. If you're on the yard and you see a group of guys congregating over here and another group of guys congregating over here and they're kind of eyeballing each other, they're probably going to go at it. And when you have a big group fight like that, the cops are going to come out in force. The guards are going to come out in full riot gear. People are going to get pepper balled or pepper sprayed, or they're going to get hit with rubber bullets. And it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant at all. And it's a very real reality. It's a very real part of existing in prison. So even though I'm not in that environment anymore, I look for stuff like that. I'm hypervigilant. And everything in prison happens during a mass movement. So if there's going to be a big fight or something like that, it's going to take place when a lot of people are in the same area at the same time. Think about it. If you're locked down all the time, let's say I'm in one cell and you're a few cells over and we have a problem and we want to fight, or I want to stab you or you want to stab me, whatever. I can't just get at you when I want to, when I'm stuck in my cell. I have to wait till they run everybody at once. When they run chow in prison, when they run yard, when they do religious call-outs, they'll let a whole bunch of people out at once. Usually you'll have a couple cell blocks going to chow at the same time or going to yard at the same time or something like that. And so you have this mass movement. You have a large group of people moving together. And that's when people are going to get into a fight. That's when people are going to try to stab somebody. So I pay attention to stuff like that. And I don't like being in crowded areas. I don't like being in lines. Stuff would happen in the chow lines sometimes. I don't like being in those situations. And I feel so uncomfortable out in open areas in the free world and being around groups of people that I get anxiety and I become reclusive. And of course, a part of that too is the fact that I used to spend so much time in a cell every day. Especially when I was in the hole. I was actually released from a mental health unit, but it was very much like the hole. And so, I was locked in my cell for over 20 hours a day. And that's difficult. When I was in the hole, it was 23. When I was in the mental health unit, it was a little bit less than that. But that takes a toll on your psyche. This is my world, my personal space. This is my room. I don't like people in my personal space. I don't like people coming up to me. I don't like people knocking on my door. I don't like stuff like that. Because this is my space. In prison, you don't just walk up to somebody's door and knock on it. You better have a damn good reason for knocking on somebody's door in prison. You don't just walk into their house, their cell. We call it a house in prison. You don't just walk in. You don't knock on somebody's door just for the hell of it. You better have a reason. So there's that. Then there's technology. Technology was a big change. You know, when I got arrested, we had flip phones. That was the thing. When I got out, I went up to A&D. I sat in A&D for a while. That's where you actually go right before you get out. You go up to A&D, and they give you your property. They give you the money that was on your books, which in Kansas they do that by giving you a prepaid debit card. They take your picture, get your info, make sure you have your social security card, make sure you have your birth certificate, and they let you go. And that's, you know, how it went. I remember sitting in A&D and everybody was talking about what they wanted to do as soon as they got out. Some guys were talking about getting high. Other guys were talking about going and getting drunk. Other guys were talking about going and getting laid. And these are all guys that were down from 3 to 5 years. They hadn't been down very long. And they turned to me and they asked me what I wanted to do when I got out. You know, they say, "Hey, Swanson, you've been in for a while. What are you going to do when you get out?" And I said, "I'm going to get a double quarter pounder with cheese and a guitar. That's what I wanted to do when I got out." And they couldn't believe that. They didn't understand. But once you go a long time without getting high or getting drunk or getting laid, it's not that big of a deal. The same is not true for double quarter pounders with cheese. I just don't know how to make that distinction where that is something beautiful and tasty. Yeah. Okay, back on subject. So when I got out, my buddy Robert picked me up from A&D, and he handed me an LG Stylo 3. This is a Stylo 5. This, if I can actually clean this off a little bit because it's collecting dust over here in the corner, is the phone that I got when I got out. You can see it's taped up, it's beat up. This was the phone that I had for a while, and I was not easy on it. But my buddy Robert handed me this phone, and it was completely foreign to me. Smartphones, when I got arrested, weren't really a thing. I think the iPhone came out the same year I was arrested. I don't know if it was before or after, but it hadn't really caught on yet. You know, it wasn't the big thing. The big thing was a BlackBerry. That was the big thing. Flip phones were still big. And they look nothing like this. This is flat. It's a giant square. It doesn't look like a phone. You can't even hold it. Like if you try to put this thing up between your shoulder and your ear like we used to do back in the day, you're going to drop this sucker and you're going to break it. It doesn't work. So that was weird. He had to show me how to swipe on it, navigate the phone, and how to get it to do whatever. And he took me down to Kansas City. I was released in Leavenworth County in Lansing, Kansas. And he took me down to Kansas City to a McDonald's. And he had the McDonald's app on his phone. I knew nothing about apps. And he ordered our food ahead of time, paid for it ahead of time. When we pulled up at the McDonald's, we pulled into a parking space. Some guy came out, handed us a bag of food, and walked away. I didn't even see any money change hands. I thought that we had committed a crime because it confused me. I was not familiar with it. The same thing with the Walmart self-checkout. They didn't have that when I got locked up. So that was a weird thing for me. And to this day, Walmart self-checkouts creep me out, and I feel like I'm committing a crime, but more importantly, they creep me out because when someone in prison says, "You're going to have to pay another way," that's a bad thing. That means that they want to rape you. That means they want your butt, and that's not good. So when I went through the Walmart self-checkout, it said, please insert cash or pay another way. Rubbed me the wrong way. Nope. Well, excuse me? What you getting at, robot? I was about, nope. I ain't about to get boogered by R2D2. Not happening. But, yeah, to this day, when I go to the Walmart self-checkout, it creeps me out. It's kind of weird. Walmart self-checkout is kind of pervy. Just saying. But yeah, so that's a problem. It's not just the technology. There are certain things that I'm not familiar with that I feel uncomfortable doing because I'm not accustomed to it. If I go to a restaurant or a drive-thru or something like that, I won't actually look through the menu. I'll see the first thing that looks good to me, I'll pick that, and that's what I'll get to eat. Because when people ask me what I want, it feels weird because I'm not used to getting the choice to pick what I eat. That seems strange to me. You know, you get what they put on your tray, or you get what they sell on canteen. You don't really get much choice in what you eat in prison. So I'm not really used to that. And yeah, that's weird. You know, I'll go to a drive-through and someone will say, "What do you want?" I'll just say, "What? I'll have whatever you have," because I have no idea what I want. It's very hard for me to choose. Some other changes that happen when you go to prison and then when you get back out. You have that sense of belonging and sense of acceptance. You know, you are in there with people, like I said, at some of their lowest points, and you feel accepted by them because you're all in it together. You all have a criminal conviction. You're all in prison for something. Even if some people claim they're innocent, which there are innocent men in prison, even though that is the case, you're all convicted. You're all in it together. And, you know, you don't really look down on each other, except for pedophiles. Everybody looks down on pedophiles. But for the most part, people don't judge each other. They accept each other for who they are. You're all in it together. And because of that acceptance, you can easily get a job within a prison. You can get a job as an electrician. I was an electrician. I was a clerk. I did data entry. I taught classes. I taught music classes. You know, I did a lot of things. I even trained a dog, you know, and it wasn't a problem getting those jobs because it was accepted that we were all convicted felons. So, you know, there was not that barrier there. But you have a sense of belonging, you have a sense of camaraderie, you have a sense of acceptance. That is all there. And then when you come out onto the streets, you feel ostracized and stigmatized. People know that you're a convicted felon, or you have to tell people, like in job interviews, that you're a convicted felon. If you go back to the community that you came from, people will remember you. A lot of people getting out of prison have a really bad reputation. In my case, I had a horrible reputation. People in my area hated me. But I got out of prison. Well, actually, before I got out of prison, I was taking classes. I went to college in prison. I took self-help classes. I got certifications. I tried to better myself with my time. And even though I did all that, that's not what I'm known for. When I got out, they don't know that I went through all those classes. They don't know what I did to better myself. They know that I went to prison for kidnapping somebody and shooting them, and now I'm moving back into their community. So no, you don't have that sense of acceptance or belonging. You feel like you came from a different world. You feel like society hates you. I mean, you're demonized by the media. It's rough. Like, it's a rough feeling. And then you have to worry about all these other things that you didn't have to worry about when you were locked up. You know, housing, finances, employment. In prison, you're guaranteed to have a bed to sleep on. You're guaranteed to have a roof over your head. You're guaranteed to have food in your belly. They're going to feed you. They're going to give you a bed. They're not going to kick you out if you don't pay rent. And funny enough, some people in prison actually do pay rent. So you have these other things that you have to worry about. And I went to prison when I was in high school. I was a junior in high school. I had never lived in the free world as an independent adult. There was a lot of things that I had no idea how to do. When other people were graduating high school, getting their first car, getting their first place, getting a job, going to college, when they were learning how to do that, I was learning how to fight. I was learning how to avoid being stabbed or raped. I was learning how to talk to people with respect and learning the politics and the social dynamics of prison. That's what I know. It's very different. And when it comes to work, so in prison, everybody has a conviction. Everybody has a record. And if you conduct yourself in a pretty upstanding manner, you can get any job that you want. There were jobs that I was really good at in prison. All the jobs that I mentioned just a few minutes ago were jobs that I was very skilled at. I was very good at those jobs. And it was easy for me to get those jobs. If you have the skills in prison, you can get a job that fits those skills. Bottom line, you stay out of trouble and you're willing to work. On the free world, that's not necessarily the case. I have a lot of skills, but I might not be able to get a job that meets those skills or matches those skills because I don't have a certification or a degree in that field, or I have a criminal record. Very different. So I might end up taking a job that I don't like just in order to get by. You don't really have to do that in prison. So what are the implications of all of this? The hypervigilance, the reclusiveness, the fear of open spaces, the heightened anxiety, having to adapt to technology, to societal changes, not feeling like you belong, not feeling like you're accepted, having difficulty with work, your finances, your housing, all of this other stuff. It can be so overwhelming for an individual. They can go back to using drugs and alcohol. They can become violent. They can become depressed. They can look for ways to get themselves put back in prison. A friend of mine just went back to jail. I'm pretty sure he's headed for prison because he was out and he violated his parole and he's going back. That's really rough. I hate to see people doing life on the installment plan, especially when they're very good friends of mine. It hurts me because prison is no place to live. But it happens. So people will intentionally sabotage themselves just so they can go back to prison. People will also struggle with suicidal ideation. I think suicide rates, I know suicide rates among people who have been released from prison recently are much higher than the national average. And that's sad. You go through all that shit to get out. And when that day comes and you finally get out, it's too much for you and it's overwhelming. And you check out and you never get to experience the world that you wanted to experience so badly when you were in prison. And I've been there. I've been there emotionally, where you don't feel like you belong in prison, but you don't really feel like you belong out here. And you got to take it one day at a time. I might not feel good on one day, but the next might be pretty damn good. And I have people around me that push me when I'm going through hard times, and they're there to support me when I'm going through hard times and struggling mentally. I have people there for me who understand. They might not have been in my shoes exactly, but they understand that I'm going through some rough stuff, and they're there to help me through it. And so all the overwhelming support that I have, the perseverance that I believe is necessary, and the willingness to adapt and overcome, That is what gets me through those dark times. Now, that's not a formula for people. I'm not someone who can speak on suicide and authority. I'm talking about my personal experiences. I can't tell you what to do if you're struggling with that. What I can say is that suicide is a permanent solution to an impermanent problem. Circumstances can change. There's no limit to the heights that you can achieve if you believe in yourself and you apply yourself. You can overcome any obstacle, you can achieve any goal. That's what I believe in. And you know what? Today might be rough, but tomorrow might be pretty damn good. You never know what the future may bring. And you'll never know unless you push forward and keep going. Something that I can also say is that suicide is really painful, especially to those who are around you and love you and value you. I've dealt with suicide in my life. I've lost people, and it's rough. I've lost probably one friend per year since I got out, and probably the last year I was in prison. I've lost at least one person a year, if not more, to suicide. And that's difficult. You know, people have so much potential. They're so beautiful. And to see them in so much pain that they give up, or they throw in the towel, or they just say, you know what, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Or I don't want to do this anymore. Or they feel that nobody appreciates them. That's rough, man. That's really rough. You know, people need to find some way to carry on, whether it's through professional help, through reflection. You know, there's so much beauty in people, and there's so much potential in people. And I would love to see people overcome obstacles. There's no obstacle too great. If you apply yourself, you can get through it. I promise you. Anyway, those are my thoughts and experiences on being institutionalized. I hope this has been helpful to you in some way, and I appreciate you watching. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric, and I will see y'all later.